Welcome back to Let's Run It Back, where we dive deep into the shows and movies that made our childhood so special. Today, we're traveling back to the 90s and taking a look at one of the most iconic children's horror shows of all time, Goosebumps. If you were a kid back then, you probably remember racing home after school to catch this show on Fox Kids. And for good reason, it was one of the most popular and memorable shows of the era. But what made Goosebumps such a phenomenon? Let's break it down from its origins in the world of children's literature to the legacy it's left behind. Before we talk about the TV show, we need to address the source material, the Goosebumps books. R.L. Stine created something truly special when he started this series back in 1992. At a time when children's literature was full of safe, predictable stories, Goosebumps brought something entirely different. Real scares, eerie atmospheres, and cliffhangers that made you want to grab the next book as soon as you finished one. Each book in the series was a standalone story, usually focusing on a young protagonist dealing with a strange, often supernatural situation. Whether it was a cursed Halloween mask, a ventriloquist dummy that came to life, or a haunted amusement park, the Goosebumps books hooked readers with their eerie but fun tales. And let me tell you, these books were everywhere. By the time the TV show premiered in 1995, the Goosebumps book series had already become a runaway success. In just a few short years, millions of copies had been sold around the world. R.L. Stine was being hailed as the Stephen King of children's literature. It was clear that there was a huge appetite for spooky, but not too scary, stories for kids, and Goosebumps filled that niche perfectly. But like any massive cultural hit, it was only a matter of time before the books found their way to the small screen.
You will beware, you're in for a scare.
Premiering in 1995 on Fox Kids, Goosebumps quickly became a favorite among viewers. If you grew up in the 90s, chances are you still remember that chilling theme song, the one that would play as a black, ominous figure floated through a creepy neighborhood. Just hearing those first few notes was enough to get your heart racing in anticipation of what terrifying tale was about to unfold. What made the show work so well was its commitment to bringing R.L. Stine's stories to life in a way that was faithful to the books, but also accessible to a young TV audience. Like the books, the show managed to capture that perfect balance between spooky and fun. It was scary enough to give kids a thrill, but it never crossed the line into territory that would give parents too much concern. The show took many of the most popular stories from the books and adapted them into half-hour or hour-long episodes. Some of the most memorable episodes include The Haunted Mask, Night of the Living Dummy, Say Cheese and Die, and The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. If you read the books, seeing these stories come to life on screen was a treat. Now, one of the interesting things about the Goosebumps TV show was its episodic nature. Each episode was a self-contained story, so you could jump in at any point without feeling like you missed anything. This format was perfect for the young audience the show was targeting. Kids could tune in, watch a spooky story, and then come back next week for something completely new. It also gave the show a lot of variety. One week you might be watching a story about a haunted camera that predicts accidents. And the next week, you could be watching a tale about a summer camp with a sinister secret. The diversity of the stories kept things fresh and exciting. Behind the scenes, the development of the show was a fascinating process. R.L. Stine was deeply involved, ensuring that the TV adaptation stayed true to the tone of his books. But the production team also had to figure out how to take stories that worked on the page and make them visually compelling for TV. This meant creating practical effects and costumes that, while often campy, were still effective at delivering chills. And remember, this was the mid-90s, so the show didn't have access to the kind of CGI we see today. They had to rely on practical effects, prosthetics, and good old-fashioned suspense to keep the scares coming. Despite these limitations, the show excelled at creating a creepy atmosphere. One of the most iconic episodes, The Haunted Mask, is a perfect example of how well the show could create tension. In this story, a young girl buys a Halloween mask that, once she puts it on, starts to take over her personality and refuses to come off. The concept itself is terrifying, but the way the episode is shot, using dark lighting, unsettling music, and great pacing, makes it one of the standout stories of the series. The same can be said for Night of the Living Dummy, which introduced kids everywhere to Slappy, one of the creepiest characters in the Goosebumps universe. Slappy's sinister laugh and twisted sense of humor made him a fan-favorite villain, and he would go on to appear in several episodes throughout the series. By the time the show ended in 1998, it had cemented its place in 90s pop culture. Goosebumps was one of the most watched shows on Fox Kids, and for many kids of that era, it was their introduction to the horror genre. What's more, the show helped to further popularize the Goosebumps brand, which was already a powerhouse thanks to the books. Even after the show ended, reruns continued to air, keeping it alive for years to come. But what is the legacy of Goosebumps today? Well, for one, the show is still fondly remembered by those who grew up watching it. The 90s were a golden age for children's television, and Goosebumps stands alongside shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark as one of the defining horror series of the era. In fact, many people still debate which show was better, Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark? Both shows had their own strengths. Goosebumps had the benefit of being based on a wildly popular book series, while Are You Afraid of the Dark had original, often more mature stories. But for a lot of kids, Goosebumps was the gateway into a love of all things spooky. Speaking of Are You Afraid of the Dark? I've actually covered both versions of that show in a previous video. If you're looking for even more spooky fun, I highly recommend checking it out as I continue to take on Halloween-themed shows, movies, and specials throughout the month of October. As for Goosebumps, the franchise hasn't exactly faded away. There have been modern takes on the property, including the recent Goosebumps movie starring Jack Black and a rebooted TV series. I have to admit, I haven't checked out the new adaptations yet. Maybe it's because I hold the original series so close to my heart, or maybe it's because I've heard mixed reviews about the newer takes. But hey, if enough of you want me to dive into the new movies or the rebooted show, let me know in the comments. Who knows, I might give them a shot and let you know what I think in a future video. One of the things I love most about revisiting Goosebumps is that it taps into a kind of nostalgia that's hard to find in modern kids' shows. The 90s were a different time. There was something special about the way these shows balanced being just scary enough for kids while still keeping things fun. It's that same balance that made Goosebumps such a massive hit and why so many people still remember it fondly today. Now, before I wrap things up, I've got a question for you all. Back in the day, did you prefer Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark? I know that debate has been going on for decades, and I'm curious to hear where you all stand. Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'll be covering more spooky, nostalgic shows and movies all month long in honor of Halloween, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep the scares and the nostalgia alive.